What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Brought to you by the Undroppables Network. I am your host, Schulte. And if you watched episode 1 and came back, well, you're awesome and I love you. Let's just get to it. All right, today we are going to be talking some training camp. That's right, people. We finally made it. Football is back in Duval. Can't be more excited. And in order to get ready for camp, I have decided to bring on a special guest. As a Jags fan, I'm sure that you probably already know who he is. But if you don't, he is the beat reporter for Jaguars on SI, formerly Jaguar Report. He is a confirmed ball knower, despite a poor showing in a recent AFC South draft, and he has handed out more Baalke Balls than the number of actual draft picks Trent Baalke himself has made in the last 3 seasons. That's right, folks. It's John Shipley. John, welcome. How's it going, man?
How you doing, man? Doing good, man. Thanks for having me on. I
fantastic.
appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, thanks to you. I mean, I'm not here without you, to be honest. I was just a guy who saw you looking for writers, and I was like, hey, I like to write fantasy stuff. And you were like, cool, let's do it. And now here I am. So hell yeah, man. I appreciate you.
You killed it. You've been killing it. You can continue to kill it. No, 100%.
Yeah, I'm ready to keep writing more for
I'm
you
happy
this
to
year.
be here. Happy we're getting back to
real football. All right, first off here,
exactly.
though, we're going to talk the throwbacks. Today, I wore mine, Byron Leftwich. What's your opinion on throwbacks? For me, they look absolutely perfect. I'm in love, as most Jags fans are. I know they're coming, week 5 for the Colts game. Are we going to get anything else, or give us your scoop?
Yeah, well, it's going to be at least week 5. I'm not sure what other weeks that they're going to be playing with them. Like, to me, they obviously look incredible. Like, I think they completely nailed it in that regard. The old Jaguars logo, the sleeves. Only thing it's missing is maybe like the old mesh of the Jaguars throwbacks, like that one. And that's just because like the NFL doesn't design, jerseys like that anymore. It'd be cool to see what like the black and white versions of them look like too, because those are just like as good. Like the old all black, throwbacks were fantastic. But I mean, my biggest impression seeing them is like, why aren't they like what you wear now? Because one, it sets them apart from the rest of the league, gives them an identity. And then 2, you look at that and then you look at the jerseys they're wearing in games now, and they look like practice jerseys. They lack so much creativity, so much like imagine. Like there's some of the blandest jerseys in the league that they wear right now. So being a bland jersey, I guess, is an upgrade from what they wore during like the Gus Bradley era, but you could still obviously be much better. Like when I see the throwbacks, I just wonder like, why aren't you wearing these now? Because honestly, they'd probably make a ton of money on it too. I bet people would cough up a ton if you sold throwbacks year round as opposed to the regular merchandise they have now. You buy somebody a Trevor Lawrence jersey now, like a kid, and it's almost like a half gift. Like, yeah, it's like Trevor Lawrence, but what kid is like actively wearing a current Jaguars jersey? They're just kind of lame jerseys, and I don't feel like that's a controversial opinion either. I feel like most people kind of feel that way.
Yeah, I don't think it's controversial. I think we were happy just because we got Teal back, like, as primary, and that was like enough to satiate that craving. But now that we've got this here, it's like, whoa. And it's so simple as like putting the trim on the numbers. Like it's little things that if you just did these things to the current jerseys, they would pop. But yeah, I'm all for getting them back full time. I know it's not going to happen. It's the jersey I fell in love with as a little kid in Northern Indiana. Like, that's how cool those jerseys are, man. Like, uh,
Man, that was Colts country.
right, exactly. I
Yeah.
was growing up in the middle of a bunch of Colts fans, and I became a Jaguars fan because that damn teal jersey. So it's badass. I love it.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, cool. We'll just get right into some training camp stuff here.
Let's do it.
I know you were out there. How much of OTAs were you actually able to be out for?
So we go to like every third practice, I think. So we see
Okay.
like that's one like such weird thing with OTA reporting across the league. Like, for instance, I wrote that Tank Bigsby struggled with drops in the practices I was at in OTAs, which was true. He had, I think, like 3 or 4 in the handful of OTA practices we went to. And, it got aggregated on Twitter and stuff like that. On the other hand, Tank Bigsby could have looked like LaDainian Tomlinson in the practices I wasn't out there. Like I legit don't know.
Absolutely fair.
As opposed to training camp, we see pretty much everything.
That's funny you say that too about Bigsby specifically, because that tweet ran its way through the fantasy world like big time. Well, Tank Bigsby, don't fall for it again. Which it's like, well, you shouldn't have fell for it the first time, but
well, I fell for it he legitimately looked good last offseason and training camp, and I've asked other beat members since then. I was like, was I just crazy? Like, he actually looked impressive, right? Like, I wasn't seeing a mirage. They're like, no, he legitimately looked good until like week 1 began. And that's like never my intention with that kind of stuff. Like, that was just like I was trying to provide my like everyday and like loyal readers like some context into stuff I've seen. I'm not writing it ever from the scope of fantasy. So when I saw that, I was like, God, I hope Tank Bigsby doesn't see that. I'm not trying. Yeah, I'm not trying to be a fantasy bro and like dogging. I'm just saying what I've seen.
Exactly, and that's your job. So and as soon as I saw you post that, I knew it. I was like, "Uh-oh, here it goes."
I didn't actively tweet it out or anything like that. Like, I just would tweet the headline, and I'm like, I'm not touching any of the content there.
But with you being there for some of it, what are you looking forward to carrying over from OTAs into camp?
I've been seeing Trevor Lawrence develop with his new weapons. Obviously, Gabe Davis, like he would do some like positional stuff, but he didn't do any team drill stuff because he's like evidently pretty much every other free agent they signed and is recovering from some kind of injury, from last year.
So he didn't do any. Fans feel about that?
Yeah. God, so brutal. And then Brian Thomas, like obviously you saw Trevor and him start to try to build a rapport, but it just obviously it was in the very infancy stages. So I'm interested to see how he grows with those two over training camp. He already has like a mind to melt with Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk. Like you watch him on the practice field, and it's obvious he's thrown like thousands of passes to these guys over the course of now going into their third training camp together. So I'm interested to see how he develops with the two new guys as opposed to them. That's a big reason why I think Kirk and Ingram are still going to lead the team in targets and stuff this year. The passing game's still going to go through them. It's just they have that instant chemistry with Lawrence as opposed to, you saw Lawrence try to get instant chemistry with Ridley last year. Sometimes it takes time.
You're right. They definitely tried to force that chemistry and didn't exactly bring the best result. And I'm with you about Kirk and Ingram. We'll touch on them a little bit later, but I still think they're going to be the stars here. Last season, we saw that big defensive collapse led to Mike Caldwell getting fired. A lot of eyes going to be on Ryan Nielsen in the defense here. Have you noticed anything specifically about like his coaching style on the field, or like anything you dislike about him, and how will he bring an impact from non-scheme perspective? And then on the scheme side, what do you think will look differently?
I do think he's probably like very different in terms of his approach and probably even his mentality and personality than Mike Caldwell. Not even in a good or bad way. They're just different because I had a lot of respect for Mike Caldwell before, that hell stretch of the last 6 games of the season. I mean, the defense was the primary reason they were 8-3. First half of the season, they looked like, maybe a top 12 defense in the NFL. They obviously fell off after that, but things I see Nielsen do differently, just from my vantage point. I wouldn't say more detailed, but maybe more hands-on. Like he's more in like the thick of things, especially like one-on-one stuff, than as opposed to maybe Caldwell. And just stuff I've heard from inside the building, players I've talked to, is that this isn't in a negative way, but I mean, he's a hard ass, you know, like he's like your classic, like cliche, like defensive coordinator, you know? So I think that's something that, I mean, again, the same people who tell me he's a hard ass and he'll get after him also say that they think, one, it's going to be good for them, and two, that they're already expecting like improved results. So I think there's a lot of positivity and a lot of enthusiasm inside the building about Nielsen. Like I've said before on, my podcast with Gus Lowe, I think Nielsen's a future head coach. Like just talking to the guy, just seeing how he works, talking to people he's coached, like, I think he strings together another good season or two as a defense coordinator, and I think he's going to be a head coach eventually.
Yeah, let's hope we at least get 2 out of him. I mean, you look at the job he did in Atlanta with like not great talent, and you're going to give him this front four, some real, some potential talent in the secondary. Yeah, I love it. I'm really looking forward to see what he is going to bring. And then on the field, do you think anything is going to look majorly differently?
Well, the big change is going to be, so it's not like an argument of man versus zone. The Jaguars ran a ton of zone last year. I think they're among like the league leaders in like zone coverage percentage. But that's primarily because of like their scheme. They were one of the league leaders in off coverage last year and one of the, lowest percentage of teams in press coverage last year. And that's the big thing Nielsen brings. You can still play zone in press. You can still play man in press. Like it's funny. I had, like a Jaguars fan tweeting at me about how is it press coverage if they're playing in a zone, and Arif Hassan replied, and he was like, how's a fan who watched Gus Bradley for 5 years asked that? Because like the cover 3, like Seattle Seahawks thing, like, yeah, it's still press and zone, like it's, so I think that's the biggest difference is Nielsen will have guys be challenged at the line of scrimmage more often. You didn't really see that ever in the Mike Caldwell scheme. Guys were more instructed on kind of reading the quarterback, reading the routes. Now I think you're going to be seeing more guys challenged at the line of scrimmage. I think you're going to see defensive backs involved in, the blitzing game more often too. I think, a big thing Nielsen did was he brought his safeties and his nickel cornerbacks on blitzes. I think you're going to see that more often in Jacksonville. Guys like Antonio Johnson, Darnell Savage, even maybe Andre Cisco, I think are going to be able to get after the quarterback a bit more.
Yeah, I love to hear that. I'm just over the like, this is what we play, and we're just gonna beat you doing it. Like, like the Gus Bradley mindset. And I mean, a little bit, I feel like Caldwell was a little bit that way. He wasn't trying to get super insane with some pressures and stuff, but getting that mixed up in there in today's league is super important. If you're just gonna stand back there and let the defense know what you're doing all day, you're in trouble. Like, that's just how it is now. Keeping it on the defense, though, personally, super excited about the starting 4. No doubts about Josh Hines-Allen continuing to do his thing. Trayvon's just going to get better as an overall player. Devon Hamilton hopefully comes back strong after that weird injury in season last year. And now we got Eric Armstead. Legitimately scary group of dudes. Behind that, you got some vets, Roy Robertson Harris, Adam Gostis, Travis Gibson. And then beyond them, it's just a bunch of young dudes. How do you see the back end of the D-line shaking out here?
I mean, I don't think they're going to chase any veteran guys and free agency or anything like that. I think they're going to roll with the group that they have now. Obviously, they're going to be super high on their starting group of guys, Josh Hines-Allen, Trayvon Walker. Both had good years last year. Hines-Allen obviously had a great year. Eric Armstead, you mentioned Devon Hamilton. He said during OTAs that I think he lost like 20 to 25 pounds last year, dealing with that spinal abscess that he had. So he said he had put that weight. He's now put that weight back on. He looks more like, the old Devon. So I think as long as he gets his legs, under him, and it looks like he did last training camp before all that happened, that could be a scary, starting 4. Some of the younger guys, like I think Miles Cole, the 7th round pick, is a year or 2 from being able to maybe contribute. Like he has a ton of traits, but right now he's just traits. There's still a long ways to go for him. I think Travis Gibson's obviously one guy to look at. He played for Bill Shuey in Chicago, had a really productive year there as a pass rusher. He has a lot of the traits that you look for. He's very long. He's very athletic. He's thrived as a designated pass rusher before. Didn't play a lot with Tennessee last year, and has openly admitted that, he told me in a story I did during OTAs that he had an offer from Jacksonville last year, and he chose to go to Tennessee, and he was basically like, bad move, wrong move. So now he's here, in Jacksonville. I think he can carve out a role potentially as a number 3 edge guy. Yasir Abdullah, I think, can maybe be, situational pass rusher guy coming off the edge. And then DJ Coleman is an under the radar guy, undrafted free agent last year, spent the year on the practice squad. They're high on him internally, so I could see him, potentially making some noise as well.
Cool. Do you think both of the LSU rookies make the squad? I mean, obviously.
Yeah. No, I don't think either is going to play a ton, but I do think that they'll, at least stress out on game day, most likely.
Yeah, because I didn't know Jordan Jefferson. I didn't know anything about him. But reading about him and stuff, it was like, damn, this feels like this might have been kind of a big reach here.
Yeah, like to me, I think he profiles as a solid nose tackle, rotational nose tackle, maybe one day a starting nose tackle, just not a lot of third down value where, you're asking yourself in the 4th round is a backup nose tackle this time, the best need. Right. Probably not. And I don't think that's a knock on him as a player. It's just, how value is his role in the NFL.
Right. It's kind of, and then it's simple. Kind of goes back to the Tank and the Brenton Strange thing is like, do you need this right now?
Yeah. And I guess it's easier to pull that trigger in the 4th round, but I mean, he was also in the draft community, consensusly known as the 3rd LSU defensive tackle, and they took him 2nd. But the other guy they weren't going to take because he's a 3 technique just like Mason Smith, so they were never going to take that guy instead.
Well, here we are. Cornerback room, quite the turnover here. Got Darius Williams left, Trey Herndon left, leaving only Tyson Campbell as the returning starter. They signed Ronald Darby. I like that one a lot. Drafted Jarian Jones, who looked really good in OTAs. Is it as simple as slotting those 2 dudes in the 2 vacant spots? And who's going to be outside? Who's going to be inside?
Yeah, I think it's probably that, simple. I think Darnell Savage is my guess to be the week 1 slot, which, he's been a safety throughout his career. He's drafted as safety in Green Bay, but Doug Peterson said at the coaches, the owners' meetings, in the offseason that they envisioned him as a slot, even though they drafted Jarian Jones, who is more, in my mind, a slot corner than an outside guy. I still think Darnell Savage is the leader for the slot position. So that leaves, one outside cornerback role between Darby and Jones. I thought Jones, if you're asking who are the 3 best, just pure cornerbacks, Jones is clearly number 2 and number 3, behind Tyson Campbell. He looked phenomenal during OTAs. If he plays early on, I'd imagine it'd be outside. So maybe you see a competition between him and Darby. Like I said, I think he's a better fit inside, but they just paid Darnell Savage a, not insignificant amount of money to play, that role. Whereas Darby was one of their, cheaper deals signed in free agency. I'm a big Darby fan. I think he's a really good cover guy, but I could see there being a competition between him and Jones. And then if any injury happens, whether it's Jones, Campbell, Savage, whatever, I think Darby, I think Jones will be the first guy to kind of come off the bench and go in there if he's not already a starter.
Yeah, I think the depth looks a lot better too, because you're still sitting on Monteric Brown, who was last year's emergency guy, and he was fine as a fill-in. So now you're pushing him even further down. I think you're looking overall better depth there.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, if you start week 1 with Jones on the bench, that's pretty significant because he would not have been on the bench in week 1 last year. And I say that as a Trey Herndon truther. I got to know, Trey over the years covering him, but I think he's one of the more underrated pieces, that they've had in the cornerback room the last couple of years. And I still think Jones is a pretty, sizable potential upgrade in the slot.
Good. I love that. I didn't know much about him either. Reading about him, yeah, he's got those good inside traits, and I would love to see him, flourish in that, especially a homegrown dude. We need more. For sure.
And personality wise, I think fans are gonna love him. Watch his draft day phone call with Doug Peterson and Trent Baalke. He was so emotional. He kept calling Trent Baalke coach, which might have been a highlight of the draft weekend on that end. But
it was probably really got Baalke going though. Someone thinks I'm the coach.
Draft phone calls are, to me, the best content behind the scenes of the draft. So I think he's somebody who fans are gonna really enjoy.
Yeah, and you mentioned that. I remember that call, and it was really awesome. And it's how do you watch that and not instantly like the guy?
Yeah, and you talk to people at FSU, and they say like he was one of the hearts of that team. Like last year, him and Mike Norvell, he's one of Mike Norvell's favorite players that he's had at FSU, et cetera, et cetera. You don't hear enough good things about him.
All right. Love that. All right. Moving to offense here. Brian Thomas Jr., Gabe Davis coming in to replace Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones, respectively. The speed on the perimeter just got light years better. And it's not even close to me. I think this alone is going to be game-changing for the offense. Trevor is a fantastic deep ball thrower who's never had a deep ball target, like a legit one. And now he has two. On top of that, I only expect the threat and the speed of those two guys to just create even more room for Kirk and Ingram to operate. Do you agree with the assessment there?
Yeah, I do. I think that the weird thing about like the first two receiver rooms that were built for Trevor Lawrence in 2021 and 2022 is that neither really seemed like they fit him, like in his play style at all. Like he had DJ Chark for a cup of coffee before he got hurt in 2021. Chark was probably his only true like pure vertical deep guy he's had in his career up until now. He had the ghost of, Laquan Treadwell, who he got a career year out of Treadwell, and Treadwell has since not stuck with a team, which kind of shows you, that he was being force feeding the ball to a downfield threat who wouldn't start, let alone, make most other teams' rosters. You go to 2022, and then again, Marvin Jones, even, he was more of a, smaller, maybe possession guy, back shoulder type of guy. But I didn't even think he was a great fit for Trevor Lawrence, because at that point in his career, when they got Marvin, he didn't really have his legs anymore. He couldn't get open, deep and make those impact plays. So, move to 2022, they add Zay Jones and Christian Kirk. Neither one of those guys was really, a fit either. I mean, Kirk's a good slot receiver, but, a undersized slot yard after catch guy isn't the first, fit I think of when I think of guys who would thrive, with Trevor Lawrence. And Zay Jones, another guy, he's, like a 6'1", type of possession guy who they would try to claim in public with straight faces that, oh, he has really good deep speed, but he was just never going to be, that guy. So that was another weird, addition. And then Calvin Ridley, for as good as I think he is, I think Calvin Ridley is one of the top like 12 to 13 wide receivers in the NFL. I think he's one of the best route runners in the NFL. I think he's going to have a crazy year this year, and would have done the same in Jacksonville. Just needed, obviously, to kind of sharpen up on some things at their time away from football. But even he's not like an ideal fit for Trevor Lawrence, because he's more of a guy who he's getting open based on rhythm and, timing and stuff. He's a great route runner over the middle of the field. He can win deep because he has that kind of speed and explosiveness off the line of scrimmage. But he's typically not who you're thinking about like as a pure deep threat. So now, with Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis, like you said, I think they're both like for the first time guys who actually fit Trevor Lawrence's skill set. How quickly they can get Brian Thomas up to speed, and, really Gabe Davis, how much production was him and how much of it was Josh Allen. Those are the two questions that have to be answered. But I think at least stylistically, they're better fit now than they have had in the past.
I think the thing about Gabe Davis I'm excited the most about is just watching like Red Zone and stuff, or just watching Bills games, and you see the deep touchdowns he catches. He often has multiple steps on a defender way down the field, which I can't remember a time watching Trevor on the Jags where he's uncorking deep balls to a dudes who have steps. Like it's always the defender's there, like, and they've got to make a play on it. It's never a walk-in bomb for these guys, unless it's, like that Zay Jones one that was just schemed open.
Calvin Ridley last year against the Titans.
Right.
Yeah,
so
like
I think for me, that's the biggest thing with Davis is like, even when the plays, if Allen say overthrows him or misses him or something, you're still seeing Gabe Davis have multiple steps on a defender, which we just have not seen at all here.
Yeah, for sure.
Talking about Brian Thomas, though, I was notably at the time a pretty big downer about the pick. I wasn't sold, still not sold on the fact that he could become like a true X receiver, like a lot of people think. But I'm extremely encouraged to hear the coaching staff talk the way they do, or talk the way they did in the past about him. And it was on the Hunt episode about the draft. You heard a coach say, he can run all the routes we're going to ask him to run. And that one quote changed my entire perception on the pick. They pigeonholed Ridley. I mean, you mentioned a little bit there, into the role he had last season, and it just didn't work out because it's not who he is as a player. So they wised up and they drafted the dude who fits that role. When the pick first came in, my vision was that they were going to try and square peg round hole the opposite direction that they did with Ridley. But hey, they're wising up. I've turned around on it. And I think this, I see the vision. I think it could work. Brian Thomas Jr. is bigger, taller, faster. And so, yeah, I definitely see the vision. What's your first impression seeing him in person? What do you want to see out of him throughout camp?
Yeah, I mean, he moves like you would hope a first round player would move, like somebody with his, size and speed. Like he just moves differently than the rest of the receivers on the field. He brings something different. I don't even really have a true comparison for him because just guys who are like that tall, that explosive, that smooth, but also like I don't want to say skinny or even slight of frame, but they're just, you know what I mean? Like he's not like DK. He's not like a hulking receiver, but he still has plenty of size to him. Just not many guys like him in the NFL. I was with you. I had a second round grade, on Thomas. I'm a horrible evaluator personally, so I'm wrong often, but he was just somebody who I didn't see. If I was a team looking for a receiver in the first round, I probably would have waited till later, but the Jaguars kind of read it correctly. They wouldn't have been able to wait till later. By the time they picked in the second round, most of their worthwhile receivers were gone. They had the right idea, I think, to get a rookie contract at receiver because a big thing with the Jaguars is, they just haven't drafted receivers highly, it's in the last decade. They've thrown the occasional second rounder, DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault. They took Justin Blackmon almost a decade and a half ago. Under Baalke, the only receivers they had taken before Brian Thomas were Parker Washington and Jalen Camp, and that's in over 24 selections. So I thought they had the right idea, and then the fact that they traded down, I thought you can't really, speak negatively about it. They got great value out of it. So I definitely see the speed. You see the deep threat ability. I think that, Gabe Davis is probably going to be planted at X this year. He's the guy he'll take the press coverage. He'll take on the blocking responsibilities while Brian Thomas gets his feet wet, starts, learning how to swim in the NFL, and they can still use him, on other things. And the big thing is you talk to Jaguars coaches and, they say LSU didn't even ask him to do a lot. They think he can do more than he was being asked to do in college. LSU basically asked him to run 3 routes and he did them exceptionally well because he's a complete freak of an athlete. But I think there's definitely some untapped potential there. I'm not sure, if you're thinking what's his number one receiver potential, that's probably a conversation for a couple of years down the road. I think right now he's probably just a complimentary piece, but he's definitely an exciting one.
Yeah, I'm pretty lockstep with you on that. And I think, let's see here. No, yeah, the wide receiver contract's good because you're paying out these other dudes. But with Baalke, I gave him credit last episode I talked to. The one thing he is really good at is contracts. I will give him props there. He's done a great job managing those. And you mentioned the 3 routes at LSU. Well, turns out those are Calvin Ridley's 3 routes. So that's a big plus. Offensive line, nowhere to go but up, right? I mean, we got Mitch Morse, only new face as a starter. But the depth should be improved. I mean, you're going to have the loser of the left tackle battle to be the swing tackle between Cam Robinson and Walker Little. They got Javon Foster in the 4th round. They re-signed Shatley, getting Cooper Hodges back from injury. My personal hope is that Mitch Morse can just be more reliable in communicating assignments and stuff. It felt like there was just a few plays a game that had no chance from the start, just from the offensive line looking confused or people not knowing, what their assignment was. What's your take on the outlook of the O-line moving forward? Do you think some of these problems are as simple as just knowing what the hell they're doing sometimes?
They have to basically hope that Luke Fortner is legitimately one of the worst centers in the NFL, I think. Otherwise, they're banking on that. And that injuries were the main reason they struggled last year, which there's some merit to it. Cam Robinson missed time, both because of suspension injuries. Walker Little missed time. Ezra Cleveland missed time. I mean, they were down to a 4th-string left tackle against Myles Garrett at one point because of injuries, and Blake can't. So there definitely were injuries on the left side of the ball. From center to the right side of the ball, they had no injuries, but, they still had some issues, especially in the running game, especially with Fortner. I think they're hoping that, Morse is just that much of an upgrade over Fortner, especially in the running game, that it translates to an improved offensive line. And they're hoping that they don't have the same injury issues, which, it's really a coin flip because that's something you have zero control over, whether, injuries are going to happen to everybody, but whether guys miss time or not. But that seems to be what they're banking on.
Yeah, it's tough to bank on, especially the trench guys who are the ones like literally going at it every play.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't see a way they're going to be worse. So at least there's that.
It'd be tough.
They've done a really good job bringing in back end receiving talent over the last couple of years, drafting Parker Washington. Then they've found great undrafted gems like Elijah Cooks. So you got Tim Jones has been hanging around for a while. Now you got undrafted guy Josh Cephas apparently turning some heads. How do you expect the wide receiver room to look after Brian Thomas, Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, Duvernay, and then I'm assuming Washington?
I'm assuming Washington. Yeah, I'm assuming Washington too. So then the question is like, do they carry 6? Do they carry 7? Not many teams carry 7, but the Jaguars, for whatever reason, did it last year. Basically, I think those last couple spots come down to, it's either 1 or 2 spots comes down to me, the 4 guys, Tim Jones, Elijah Cooks, Cephas, and fellow undrafted rookie Brevin Easton, who, doesn't get as much fanfare as Cephas, but he also had a really solid OTAs, from what I've, seen has, been able to impress, some people. So it really is like, what are they looking for in that spot? Or if they're looking for special teams value, obviously Tim Jones, he's one of the better special teams players on the entire roster. If they're looking for upside, Cephas and, Easton might have that, but they don't have the special teams value of Tim Jones. They're, looking for somebody who maybe it doesn't have the highest upside or the best special teams value, but has a little bit of both. You have Elijah Cook. So it's really just, what are they looking for in that final spot or two? I could see them going potentially with 7 again, just because they have so many guys who they'd probably hate to cut. But my guess is, I'd say it'd be probably Tim Jones or Elijah Cook's that final 6 spot. And I kind of lean toward it being Tim Jones, just because, fans hate him every year, but he brings, value to the roster as a 6 receiver spot. Just the truth of the matter is, in the NFL, if you're on a top 3 receiver, like, you have to play special teams. And if you don't, it's tough to keep you, on the roster. That's why it's tough for undrafted guys to make the rosters a lot of years. Like Cephas, he might be the best natural receiver of any of those guys right now. But until he brings the special teams value of a guy like Tim Jones or a guy like Elijah Cooks, it's going to be hard to get one of those last spots.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think it is going to be Tim Jones too, just simply because of special teams. And he's trusted by the coaching staff because he's been around for, a couple of years now. They can trust him to fill in at receiver, like at emergency, and he's not going to be a total liability. He's good on coverage. I think it's going to be there too. And I think if they keep 7, I think it'll be one of the undrafted guys because they're scared of losing one of them. I don't think Elijah Cooks makes it. His kind of appeal was that he's huge in like a red zone kind of like that was like literally why people wanted him on the roster last year, because we don't have that size. Well, now we do. So I think he might be on his way out there.
Makes sense.
Even though it is training camp, it's not all sunshines and rainbows. What is your biggest concern with the team?
I think just going back to offensive line, like, one, you have to consider, are they even right about health being the reason the offensive line wasn't good last year? That's not even a guarantee. Again, the right side was healthy. And I know the offensive line's a unit. They need to play cohesively, but I mean, injuries aren't why Luke Fortner struggled in the run game, or why Brandon Sheriff struggled in the run game, or why Anton Harrison struggled in the running game. So, and then 2, if they are right, again, injuries are something they have no control over. So you're really kind of banking on, a coin flip, 50-50 on whether guys or whatever on whether a guy's going to make it through the season healthy or not. So, I mean, just the fact that the only change they made was Mitch Morse over Luke Fortner. And I do think Mitch Morse is a good center. I think he's going to be a substantial, maybe not okay, probably honestly substantial, but not like he's not like an all-pro center. You know what I mean? Like he's an NFL starting center as opposed to, what they were trotting out last year. So I think that he definitely gives them value, but I'm still questioning. I think they need a couple things to fall right for their plan to, go as planned.
Yeah, that's a bold strategy to just bang on the fact no one's going to get hurt, but here we are. All right, before we get out of here, I'm gonna get you with your favorite segment, Baalke Ball. But for my spin on it, I just have one simple question. What the hell should we expect from Tank Bigsby and Brenton Strange?
Well, so I think Tank is going to be given an opportunity. I think they're like groveling and getting on their hands and knees begging for Tank to take the reins of the opportunity that he's going to be given because they don't want to use Travis Etienne as, that guy. They want, as a bell cow back, they want Travis Etienne to, be somebody who obviously is their lead back, but isn't somebody who's taking that kind of punishment, year in, year out, week in, week out. So I think they want Tank Bigsby to take some off of Travis Etienne. Whether he does or not, I mean, that's completely, to be determined how it plays out. I don't think he'll have an overly long leash. I think like after the first month of the season, if it's not working, that they'll be fine pivoting to like D'Ernest Johnson. As for Brenton Strange, like I think he's going to play more simply because maybe they feel like they kind of have to. Maybe they go to more 2 tight end sets. Like he just didn't run a lot of routes in general last year. Didn't get many looks in the passing game. So I think he'll play more as a blocker, maybe as a receiver. But I mean, in terms of, pass catching options, they obviously have their top 4 and their top 3 receivers in Evan Ingram. You can probably throw Travis Etienne in there as number 5. So the best he would be is number 6. And that's even in the scenario where he's getting more targets than, say, your Parker Washingtons or your Devin Duvernays, which I'm not sure he would be. So he'd be somewhere like, even if things broke well, like in that 8th, 7th target range. And there's just not a lot of targets there to be excited about.
No, not for a second round pick either. But hopefully, if he gets more playing time, he can get some, good blocking in, help out the line. Because
that's the thing. Like he's a good blocker. He's a very physical player. There were times last year where he was really physical. Like he got a couple, penalties, while blocking in the running game. So that's one thing that, like, I do think like he brings value, in that regard.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's his best asset, and hopefully they can get him on the field more to help out with the line some. But
100%.
All right, well, that's about it here. Thanks again, everyone here tuning in. Big shout out to John for joining me. John, go ahead and tell the people where to find you at.
Yeah, you can find me at www.si/NFL/Jaguars or Jaguars on SI. You can find me at Twitter. It's at _John_Shipley. There's like an 85-year-old sports writer in Minnesota named John Shipley. So while he's still kicking, I got the underscore. So bear with me for the time being. But thank you guys for joining me.
This is like a Josh Scobie situation happening.
I had to make sure at first too, because I was like, at first I saw the name, I'm like, why are they not making a bigger deal about this? And then like I read like the guy's profile, and I was like, no, not that Josh Scobie.
It's the fact that Josh Scobie was also an NFL player who played at the exact same time and returned a kick. I mean, just unreal.
It's good stuff. It's cool seeing Corey Peters out there. Literally seeing him practice 2 years ago, and now seeing him out there scouting. It's pretty cool to see.
That is awesome. I forgot he was on the team there for a hot minute.
Scouting, like going from being a player to scouting, especially this time of year, seems a lot better. Like they're literally just chilling there on the sidelines watching, as opposed to being out there in the grueling heat doing all that crap
and getting yelled at.
Yeah.
All right. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to the Undroppables channel, and also go check out John's podcast with Gus. What is it? The Jaguars on SI?
Yeah, Jaguars on SI podcast. Yeah, we've gone through so many rebrands. Like my site's gone through so many rebrands, so many years, but we're finally on firm ground now. No more changes.
I love it. Hopefully by the end of this, or by the season starts, Undroppables are going to have about half of the league covered. So you're going to be able to watch some fan created stuff for your favorite teams. Also, tons of other great fantasy content, including the Dynasty Pulse, a dynasty fantasy football show that I produce and I appear on sometimes. So check that one out as well. Other than that, it's about all I got. Peace out.